It all started with a simple search. I needed a new chair for my deck, a place to sit, maybe with a glass of fine whiskey, and just watch the world go by. I found a chair online. It was beautiful, it was sleek, modern, and looked like it was carved from a single, perfect tree. Then I saw the price. $2,000. For one chair. Now, I'm a man who, respects craftsmanship and good materials. I understand paying for quality, but $2,000 felt less like a price tag, and more like an insult to common sense. It was almost like a dare. A challenge to anyone with a bit of gumption and a few tools. So, the plan was born. I would build my own. I'd try to replicate this monument to outdoor luxury for a fraction of the cost. My budget was a firm $150. This wasn't just about saving money, it was about principle. It was a mission to prove that good design and a comfortable seat didn't need to cost as much as a used car. I printed out every picture of that expensive chair I could find. I zoomed in on the joints. I studied the angles of the backrest. I tried to understand the soul of the design, not just its shape. The original was probably made of teak or IPE, woods that just laugh at the rain. My budget, though, laughed right back at those choices. My research led me to the lumberyard, a place of endless possibility and, honestly, the delightful smell of fresh-cut wood. Instead of exotic hardwoods, I walked toward the stacks of construction-grade pine and cedar. These were humble woods, meant for framing houses and building fences. They were not destined for glory. I chose pine. It was affordable, easy to work with, and available everywhere. I knew it wasn't the ideal choice for outdoor furniture. Pine is soft, it soaks up water like a sponge if you let it, but with the right finish and a little care, I figured I could make it work. I spent $147 on wood, screws, and a can of outdoor sealant. The game was on. My workshop basically became a laboratory. I wasn't just copying a chair. I was reverse engineering it. The original design had these beautiful, subtle curves. The legs tapered just so. The armrests had a gentle sweep that looked incredibly inviting. These weren't just for looks. Every curve and angle was designed for comfort and strength. My challenge was to recreate that elegance with my simple pine boards. I drew full-scale templates on big sheets of paper. I measured every angle twice, then a third time, just to be sure. I wanted to honor the spirit of the original, even if I was using materials from a completely different world. It was a matter of respect for the craft. The first cuts felt wonderful. My saw sliced through the pine with a satisfying hum. The pieces started to take shape, and for a glorious afternoon, everything went perfectly. The legs came together just as I had planned. The basic frame was square and solid. I felt that familiar rush of creation, the joy of turning a pile of raw lumber into something with purpose. This was too easy, I thought. I was a genius. The furniture industry was a scam, and I was exposing it all with my trusty table saw and a pocket full of screws. I was winning the battle against overpriced patio decor. Then came the armrests. This is where doubt began to creep in like a cold draft. The original chair had armrests that were wide, flat, and seamlessly joined to the legs. They looked strong enough to stand on. My pine boards, however, were not as cooperative. They were thinner, and when I tried to create the same clean look, the joints felt weak. Pine is a soft wood, and it splits easily if you're not careful. I had to add extra support brackets underneath, hidden from view. It was, a compromise. My beautiful sleek design now had a secret. An ugly, but necessary secret holding it all together. Assembling the backrest was another lesson in humility. The expensive chair had a slatted back that curved gently to support your spine. To achieve this curve, each slat had to be cut at a slightly different angle. It was a symphony of precision. My attempt felt more like a clumsy school band recital. A few of my cuts were off by a mere fraction of a degree. It doesn't sound like much, but when you assemble all the pieces, those tiny errors add up. One slat sat a little too proud. Another had a small gap next to it. It looked like a chair, for sure, but it didn't have that flawless perfection of the original. Still, as I stood back and looked at the assembled piece, before any finish was applied, I felt a sense of accomplishment. It was a chair. It was sturdy. It looked 90% like the one in the picture. The compromises I made were mostly invisible. I had taken $150 of humble material and turned it into something that, from a distance, looked like it belonged in a fancy catalog. I was proud of it. But I also knew the truth. My chair had secrets. It had hidden screws and reinforcement blocks. It was a good copy, but it was not the real thing. The final test would be how it felt and how it would stand up to the world outside my workshop. The first time I sat in the chair was a moment of truth. I carried it out to the deck, my heart pounding a little. I had spent hours building it. Would it hold my weight? Would it be comfortable? I lowered myself into it carefully. It held. Not only did it hold, but it was surprisingly comfortable. The angles I had so carefully copied from the original design were doing their job. My back was supported. The armrests were at the perfect height. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let out a long sigh of relief. For that one perfect moment, my $150 chair felt like a $2,000 throne. This initial success, though, was just the beginning of the story. The real test for any outdoor furniture isn't a single, gentle sit-down. It's life. It's the scorching sun, the sudden downpour, the cool evening dew. It's being scraped across a deck and having a dog jump on it. My chair sat on the deck for a week. We had 2 days of bright sun and 1 afternoon of heavy rain. When I went to inspect it, the first signs of trouble were already appearing. The pine, even with a coat of sealant, had begun to swell ever so slightly from the moisture. This tiny movement changed everything. The once tight joints now had tiny gaps. When I sat in the chair, I could feel a slight wiggle that wasn't there before. A little creak echoed from the backrest. The wood itself was changing. One of the armrests, which had been perfectly flat, now had a very slight cup to it as the grain reacted to the sun and rain. These were not major failures. The chair was still safe and functional, but they were constant tiny reminders that my chair was built from a lesser material. It lacked the quiet, steadfast confidence of a piece made from dense, oily teak. The expensive chair's secret wasn't just its beauty, it was its stability. Teak and other premium outdoor woods are incredibly stable. They don't swell, twist, or warp much when they get wet or hot. That means the joints stay tight, the surfaces stay flat. The chair feels the same in July as it did in April. My pine chair, on the other hand, was a living thing. It was constantly moving and shifting with the weather. Every time I sat in it, I was subtly aware of its compromises. The confidence I felt in that first sit was slowly being replaced by a quiet, nagging worry. Looking back, the project was a success, but not in the way I expected. I didn't prove that expensive furniture is a scam. Instead, I learned what you're actually paying for. You're paying for the material. You're paying for wood that's been chosen specifically for its ability to resist the forces of nature. That $2,000 price tag buys you peace of mind. It buys you a chair that will feel solid and reliable for years, not just for a week. It buys you joinery that doesn't need hidden brackets, because the wood itself is strong enough to hold the design. If I were to build it again, I would change my approach to the materials. I would still aim for a budget build, but I would spend a little more on a better wood, like cedar. Cedar has natural oils that make it much more resistant to rot and insects than pine. It's more stable in changing humidity. The cost would be higher, maybe pushing the project closer to $250 or $300. But the result would be a chair with a much longer and more graceful life. I would also pay even more obsessive attention to the finish, applying multiple coats of a high-quality marine varnish to seal the wood completely from the elements. The lesson here is not to avoid DIY projects to save money. The lesson is to be realistic. You can absolutely build a beautiful and functional piece of furniture for a fraction of the retail cost. But you cannot expect cheap materials to perform like expensive ones. It's that simple. There is no magic trick that makes pine behave like teak. Your budget-friendly creation will require more maintenance. You will need to tighten screws, reapply sealant every year, and store it indoors during the harsh winter months. That is the trade-off. So here is my advice. If you enjoy the process of building, and you find satisfaction in making something with your own hands, then build the chair. It's a wonderful experience, but go into it with open eyes. Understand that you are trading money for your own time and future maintenance. If you are a person who just wants a chair that you can put on your deck and forget about for the next decade, then save your pennies and buy the expensive one. You are not just buying a chair, you are buying a decade of not having to think about it, and sometimes that peace of mind is worth every penny.